Yay, okay. I have no idea if that's going to work, but it'll be better than nothing. Oh, what's going on here? If you can't see what I'm doing because I'm standing in the way, move closer. It's not scary up here.
And if you can't hear him, he said, if you can't see, move up.
Don't be afraid to come up here. I won't call on you. The volunteer has already done his job. Oh yeah, it's a good thing they put that tarp down. I'm already drifting all over this place.
Does anybody have any questions?
Or suggestions or anything.
So right now you're just putting down a base coat of color inspiration?
It's just going to be like a little sunset sky kind of thing, because it felt like the sunset might be a fun color to start with.
We get a lot of that here.
Sorry?
Good sunsets.
You said we get a lot of that on 10.
If somebody could close the door, I can't hear you guys over the background noise in the dealer's room. My hearing's not so great these days.
Thank you.
So what all do you have in your bowl there?
Good question. The paints that I use are called Nova Color acrylics. And the company I found online, they're out of California. And I basically exclusively use these on my murals these days. I do quite a few mural projects up in Western Washington. And these paints are bold and vibrant and dry very, very quickly. So I know I can do something like this big pile of sunset colors in the beginning of something, and by the time I'm hitting some areas on top of it with the ship stuff, it'll be basically dry. And I'll be able to paint right over it without having too much bleed through. For painting fast, these things are perfect. And for painting things that have to be seen while you're driving in a car, they're kind of amazing too. Because, like, look at all that incredible color in, what, 30 seconds?
Yeah, a minute and a half.
Okay. See, she's keeping me honest.
Are you using like a 3-inch flat or?
This is, I believe, a 3-inch, and it's nylon. I was taught by a friend of mine long, long ago that whenever you're painting in synthetic paints, use synthetic brush. So if you're painting in oils, you want to use like squirrel hair or sable or camel or something like that. But whenever you're painting in acrylics, the natural fiber brushes will be your enemy.
Are you going to put in some happy little trees?
I might actually do 7 or 8 happy little trees here.
What kind of murals do you do?
New ones on walls. Other than that, it's whatever I work out with the person who owns or is in charge of the building. I've done everything from the most recent one is an Alice in Wonderland piece, which was just totally fun, to things that were more historical and less fantasy fun kind of stuff. Like I did one that was like a railroad depot that had been in the area that the building was near.
In the 1950s?
Mm-hmm.
With a welcome to sign?
Because it's a historical kind of town, and that's really where they needed it to go. So it was like.
You also painted a brick facade on one side of that building.
Oh yeah, it was a big aluminum building, and I turned half of the building into bricks because a brewery had moved into it. It had been office spaces before that, and this brewery was like aluminum building doesn't really say who we are. And so, what can we do to change that? I'm like, what if we made the whole west side of her building bricks instead of, I'm like, wouldn't that be expensive? That's an awful lot of brick. I'm like, no, we're not gonna actually put a single brick on the building. It's gonna just be paint. But everybody will think it's bricks when they're driving by. And totally worked. I had people who were literally coming up and touching the wall as I was painting it to prove to themselves that it wasn't real. Okay, so a big flying ship.
They asked you to do this speed painting demo because of Art Battle?
Yeah, I was talking to Justin about doing Art Battle, and he's like, how fast could you paint something during a panel? I'm like, well, I mean, maybe 20 minutes, but that would be tricky and I'd probably have to practice it. If I didn't have to practice it in advance, I could paint whatever the audience wanted in like 45. He's like, yeah, let's do that. So, yeah, it was kind of a agreed upon thing because he had seen what I had been doing with Art Battle. And you know, it's Miscon. I like painting stuff for you guys.
How many speed art battles have you done?
3 battles and a couple of demos for them that were, because I won an event, I wasn't able to compete again. But I would go in and be like the opening act where I would just paint something while they were getting the other artists warmed up. And so, a couple of those, I guess 2 or 3 of those, and then the 3 rounds of battles.
They weren't very friendly with the first one because they do 3 rounds. It's 2 rounds of 6 people each, and then the 2 with the most votes from each of those 2 rounds go into the 3rd round.
Yeah, you're painting in front of a bunch of people who are judging you. So there is some pressure to it. There's a little bit of competition. And knowing that you have to get votes, you have to do something that everybody's gonna like enough to vote for you.
So you had what, a 16 by 20 canvas?
Yep.
So you had a 16 by 20 canvas.
Well, actually, just like this one, it was 18 by 24.
18 by 24? And and that's what he had been practicing on, and that's what he did the first round on, and he won one of the spots for the 3rd round. And the 3rd round canvases were bigger.
They doubled the size of the canvases on us for round 3, and they didn't tell us they were gonna do that. They just were like, oh, by the way, surprise, you have to paint much, much bigger this time. And we're like, wait,
In the same amount of time.
That's not what we practiced. what are we going to do now? We're not at all prepared for filling that much space. I mean, imagine this, but again, like flipped over. It was huge, and every artist that was in round 3 was like, have we done it like this before? And like, no, we're gonna try something new. We're like, okay, now we're scared. What else are you going to throw at us that's crazy? But it was fun. I painted a big dragon for them, and they were all like ooh and ah afterwards. Which got me into the finals.
And they're all in a circle, and then everybody's walking around them.
One guy took his canvas, put it on the floor, was down on his knees.
Oh yeah, that was
like,
crazy.
ow.
Was he a younger person?
Yeah, he
Yeah.
painted kneeling on a concrete floor for 20 minutes. And I'm like, man, there's no way I'd have been able to walk away from that afterwards.
Yeah, that.
Well, not only was he kneeling, but he was also bent over, so his back, I'm like,
Mhm.
ow.
Yeah, it looked tough. And he did something really cool, so I get it. Like, what he was doing required his use of gravity. Like, he would have things spreading out, and then he would tilt it and have things dripping in it. All sorts of really cool effects like that. But, I don't know if it was worth the damage that it would have done. I guess art's all about how much are you willing to suffer? How much damage are you willing to take? How much are you willing to not eat that week? You know, all the things artists gotta deal with as they do this.
Somehow I have trouble imagining you having to go hungry too often anymore.
The confusion of fame and wealth is always fascinating to me. One does not equate to the other. It doesn't work like that.
There's a reason why I say I'll never be able to retire.
Yep. There's no way that I could have health insurance on what I make as an artist.
You gotta do it again and again and again.
And I couldn't survive with that. Why, when they talk, just a little political, when they talk about having national health care coverage and those kinds of things, always think of your artists when you're voting on those, because we don't get an employer giving us health insurance.
Do you enjoy painting faster, or if you have more time? I mean, like, there must be you sort of have to self-adequate. They say you have 20 minutes to do something.
Yep.
And therefore you choose your lines, you know, and everything, simplify everything. Do you prefer to do it faster, or if you have more time?
I love the challenge, but I rarely consider these a finished piece when it's done.
Right. It's more of an exercise.
Exactly. I painted it as far as I could in the challenge time.
Yeah.
And if I was given a lot longer, I would have started it very differently. And what I'm learning is there's a different kind of life to a painting that you have to do very, very quickly. And my murals have a little bit of that too, because I have to work around weather and stuff whenever I'm painting a mural. And you know, I paint in Western Washington, so I really have to work around the weather up there. It does not cooperate with us very often. What was that all going on behind me?
I moved your camera because you keep turning your back to it.
Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. Good call. Yeah, I enjoy the challenge, and I've kind of learned to just accept whatever I get in the course of it. It's sometimes a little frustrating, but more and more I'm kind of just saying I will like whatever happens and move on to the next thing.
Mike Berger was saying earlier that no piece of art is ever truly finished, and you don't want it to be, because you want the viewer to be able to fill in what they're seeing.
Definitely. That's very wise. Mike knows his stuff. And I've had so many times, especially with this one, where I've painted something that I didn't even realize I put on the canvas until it was pointed out to me later on. that happens particularly often with dragon forms that just show up in my paintings unexpectedly. But there's been a bunch of times where something showed up that worked perfectly with the theme of the painting, and it was not at all intentional.
Like what?
He was doing a character drawing for a role-playing game, and I had created the character for him to do, and it was a dragon dwarf. So it's a dwarf that has a dragon somewhere on them in some form. But she was also a paladin. So she's in full plate mail. And when he was done, he's like, I'm so sorry I wasn't able to get the dragon in there. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Her breastplate's a dragon head.
And I totally didn't realize that was the design I had created until she pointed it out to me. Like, they happen very unintentionally in my world these days.
Intentionally, too.
Also very often intentionally, yes.
Is the dragon towing the ship?
Carrying it.
Oh, cool.
You know, how is the ship flying? We have to ask these kinds of questions.
Brimstone.
Sorry, I do have to move around a bit when I'm doing this because the angle of where I'm hitting the canvas from matters.
Yeah, but at the beginning, we were getting mostly your back.
Oh yeah, right.
So I moved it.
That's unfortunate.
And then you started turning because you're right-handed.
Mhm.
I'm just gonna put it on the right side.
Yeah, had I thought this through, I would have done that. But I'm more concerned about protecting the hotel's floor, probably, than anything else.
Years ago, I would sit next to him, watch him draw, and would be like, "You're so disgusting. You do that so quickly." And now he's gone from drawing to painting that quickly, and I'm just like, "I love you, but I hate you."
All relationships should have a little of that, right? Keeps it interesting.
All have our things that somebody out there thinks is magical. He won't let me teach him how to crochet because he's like, no, it'll ruin the magic.
Ruin the magic. Cannot imagine how loops and loops and loops turn into a sweater. That's just crazy to me. But I'll wear that sweater. Nothing to stop that.
That's okay. I love to crochet, but watching you paint, that's magic.
We all have a magic of some sort. I mean, there was a guy that was standing outside the hotel yesterday, and he was painted all in bronze paint.
Yes,
And
right.
like, we walked up to it and we're like, was that statue there when we left this morning? And then he jumped out at us. We're like, okay, that was magic, because he was completely plausible. We were literally like, oh, there's a new statue that we haven't seen in Missoula.
Well, I thought it was odd because part of the statue was this bronze hat on the sidewalk. Not part of the same thing.
So, I have a feeling this is pretty early on in the panel here, and I might have time to do a second one. Anybody got any wild ideas for what might be part 2 of this?
Robot dance off.
Sorry, say again?
Robot dance off.
Robot dance off. Oh my.
It's 126.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, we're gonna get 220-minute paintings in on this.
Breaking new bounds.
Let that dry for a second while I hook this one up.
What do you do with all your finished speed paintings?
A lot of them are just like sitting on the ground in my studio, which is terrible. I shouldn't say that, but it is. When they do them at Art Battle, they auction them off at the end, and there's like a big online auction, and people bid from all over the world, and they ship them to whoever wins. Here, they're probably going to go to the art auction for the Miscon fund to make sure that Miscon keeps happening next year. You know, we want to keep this going. So I imagine it will be from 7 to 9 tomorrow. I believe in this room they do the art auction.
Yes.
And if you like it, or if it was your idea, or any of those things, come and get it. I'm sure it won't be that expensive. I'm going to tell them start it at $1 and see what people take, because I'm not doing it to make you guys spend a ton of money.
Don't take a photo.
It's not the idea. A robot dance off. This could be.
You had a question about taking a photo?
Oh, taking a photo of the picture? Yeah, come on, take a picture. No problem.
Thank you.
Of course.
Do you ever do anything to speed up the drawing process when you're in a competition type thing, or do they?
That's why he's using the mural paints.
Yes, the kinds of paints I use specifically are very, very fast drying. I mean, even with the amount of water that I just put on this and it's dripping and doing all that stuff, it'll still be basically dry before I go in and start doing the next part.
And if you had questions about the specific paint, if you want to catch Rob at a different time.
Yeah, and I can go over all the colors that I use. I've got them all labeled in my box here, so we can figure all of the specifics out for you easily. I have basically a rainbow palette. The only thing that I don't put on my palette is black, because I've learned even if I'm going to use black in a painting, I don't want it on the palette because everything on the palette gets mushy. It all starts to get mushed together, and if you have black in there with all the other colors, then you have nothing but mud, and you can't paint bright colors anymore at all.
Have you ever gotten a request that just made you go, what?
Oh yeah, all the time. All the time. And it happens more at these kinds of conventions than anywhere else because you guys all have different pop culture references for each of you. There's so much in the way of pop culture options for a geek convention like us that nobody can know all of it, right? But the thing that's your favorite thing that you really want to see somebody make art of, the artist's only got maybe a 10% chance of knowing what you're talking about. So we do the Pictionary thing. We'll be doing that later on today. And we get we get people who will suggest things where we're like, not only do I not know what that is, I don't think I could pronounce it if I had to. And you know, we make do with what we can, or we just look at you and say, y'all are nuts, and move on to the next thing, you know?
So stick with the big things, like drunk ramen?
Yeah, I mean, if you stay with the top 5, we're gonna figure that out. If you get into some of those slightly more obscure things, Google's our friend. If you start seeing stuff in foreign languages, we're gonna be very, very confused.
How do you decide how like a painting is composed?
That, for a speed painting like this, a lot of it has to happen in my head real fast. I think of what the request is and then say, what's the element that makes the most sense in the middle for something like this? And then what can go around that will add motion or some cool factor or whatever that might be unexpected. But most of my compositions have something central. I kind of stick with that. Or something that's really major on the left or really major on the right. If I'm doing something that doesn't fit that, it's usually because an art director insists on it. And those projects get really complicated because when the art director has something in mind and it's hard for me to just immediately envision it, we end up going back and forth for days, weeks, trying to figure out the in-between on what they asked for compared to what I can imagine. To apologize to any copyright lawyers out there in advance. I was given a thing and I'm really in Star Wars mode these days, so you get what you get.
I think BB-8 wins that dance-off hands down.
Of course. Nobody can really compete.
fandoms that he is his own geek of.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think there's anything that is so close to his heart as Star Wars. You should have seen him when we got to fly on R2-D2 plane back from Japan.
I mean, Galaxy's Edge was great, and there's no getting around that, but the fact that we ended up on the R2-D2 787 coming back from Japan was so unexpected, and like you never know what you're going to get. I mean, whatever plane they put you on is what plane they put you on. And I saw that one pull up to our gate, and I'm like, Gene, I think that's going to be our plane. And I was just freaking out. I couldn't believe it.
He was dancing down the aisle of the plane. They had a Yoda when you walked in, and they were playing the theme music.
And when you're taking off, the overhead lights changed to red on one side and blue on the other, and it was.
And the stewardesses were giggling at him.
Yes, there was some of that, because I was being really silly. And they're very used to all the stuffy businessmen that are just going and doing their overseas travel, and they don't care about what the airline has put together. And then I show up and I'm the biggest nerd they've ever seen. Now I'm doing this without a reference, so I really don't know how accurate it's going to be, but it's maybe slightly different droids than the ones that we really know well.
They're not the droids you're looking for.
These are not the droids you're looking for.
I can be a geek too.
These aren't the droids we need, or we want, but these are the droids that we
These are the droids that we needed right now.
Mm-hmm.
In the competitions, do they tell you what to paint? Let's say, landscape?
No, strangely enough, they don't. The only difference was the one that I started with was a special event because they were having their art battle on the same weekend as Emerald City Comic Con. So it was the first time they ever said, we really would like people to do sci-fi. But they weren't at all specific about what kind of sci-fi. And there were a bunch of folks that kind of winged it on sci-fi because it's not their style.
Right.
But then they had like Christopher Dahl showed up and he was painting against me and I looked at what he was doing, I'm like, oh God, I lose. And there's no way I'm gonna beat this guy. Because his Starscape spaceship paintings are, every single one of them is worthy of being a cover of Omni magazine. They're all incredible. And he was doing them so fast. I was still amazed that I beat him because honestly, I was practically ready to buy some of his stuff and take it home, and then I saw what the auction was going for, and I'm like, oh no, maybe my wallet says I won't.
I think he didn't win simply because of the fact that with only 20 minutes, he wasn't able to get perfect circles.
Mm-hmm. So his planets looked a little egg-like, and everybody kind of was like, well, that's an egg planet. And he didn't actually finish his final painting. That was the thing that I really think went against him, was it was clearly not done when they called time. And if he'd done something that was kind of ambiguous about whether or not it was finished at the end when they called time, he probably would have beat me. You know, I haven't painted R2-D2 probably in or drawn even R2D2 in, I would imagine 20 years would be a fair guess. But
I don't recall you ever doing R2D2. I don't recall you doing C3PO.
I have done BB-8. I did a couple of little BB-8 things when that first movie came out.
Well, you did a BB-8 on somebody's shirt.
Oh yeah,
Maddie's?
that's right.
Do you typically plan out how much time you have to spend on the background, blocking and then details?
It's kind of instinctive.
Okay.
I try to get the background to be something that I can do fairly quickly and rough so that it's not taking away from the detail that I can put into foreground elements. But yeah, I'm winging it. I'm winging it every time. I admit that. It's one of those things where when you've painted enough pictures, you kind of have an idea of what you can get away with in a limited time. And, you know, for art battles, I was out in my studio practicing every day, painting 20-minute paintings. So I got to where I really had a good feel for what 20 minutes would let me do.
Have you ever had a design in your head that you wanted to do for one of these and then had to scrap it because you couldn't get it under the time?
Yep, totally. You know what's great? Somebody asked for that as the first painting today.
Oh.
So I beat my best time on a flying ship, which I was going to do in art battle, and ended up choosing not to because I could never get it in under the 20 minutes. And somebody who saw some of my practice pieces looked at it and said, "Why isn't there a dragon element on your flying ship anywhere?" And I'm like, you know, that's a really good question. I have no answer for you on that. There should definitely be a dragon element. So this time I actually had the opportunity to put that in there like it should have been all along. What time is it?
It's 1:43. Thank you.
So I got about 6 minutes left on this before I have to start thinking about getting the room clean for the next folks. So I can do the silly stuff.
It's just Jeff Sturgeon.
Oh yeah, he gets what he gets. He'll probably roll in here 10 minutes late anyway. No, because it's his demo, so he'll be in the back saying, "Rob, get the heck out of the way." Yeah, if you guys stay and watch Jeff's demo, it will be equally, if not far more fascinating.
Is it a demo?
Yes. Yeah, he's got a demo that he's doing. And then we do Pictionary right after that. Thinking they've got a variation on the Saturday Night Fever floor, just more sci-fi looking.
Randy said she's going to ambush the art battle.
Excellent.
Which would be nice because right now it's you, Jeff, and Andy against Brittany.
You're talking about Pictionary?
Yeah.
And Brittany's probably looking at it saying, "I don't want to draw on Pictionary. I want to draw on my computer. I like my computer." The only problem with putting all of your colors on a palette at once is your white gets really messed up in the course of it. It just becomes something that wants to fight with you. Who else has fun questions? Or even just silly questions?
Anybody have any questions?
Anything.
What's the meaning of life, the universe, and everything?
42.
Asterisk.
What's your favorite Star
Very
Wars
good.
movie?
That's a good one. What's
Say-
your favorite Star Wars?
Yeah, favorite Star Wars movie.
I mean, I'm always going to have a fondness for the first one because I was there when it happened. You know, that March 25th, 1977 at the theater.
May.
Or yeah, May. Sorry, I get those confused.
The other
But
one.
Rogue One was crazy good, and I really think it's taken the place as my favorite over the original Star Wars. Still love the original Star Wars, and Carrie Fisher was in Rogue One in her kind of out of the world but still in it way, so it had that going for it. Yeah, I did like the idea that they could just put one movie out that redefined more clearly the whole reason for all of the other movies. Whoever wrote that was just too smart.
And it didn't have to have the happy ending.
And yeah, they were brave about that. They're like, not all Star Wars stories are happy at the end.
One of Vader's best moments too.
Oh God,
Being
yeah.
the terror that he is.
Mm-hmm. You know, they have that Star Wars Battleground game, and basically once you're fighting someone who's playing Vader, he's gonna kill you. And that movie explained why. It's like, as soon as you see how Vader is against tons of armed militia, just tons. And he's just like one guy, he's just going, you're gone, you're gone, you're gone.
It's 148.
Excellent. So yeah, guys, thank you for hanging out with us for an hour, and for everybody who stuck around the whole time. Like, I really appreciate it, because it's one of those things where the audience helps speed me up. Having people in here actually watching what's happening
One question.
makes me faster.
Yeah.
Have you ever painted something that you never wanted to let go of?
Oh, that's philosophical. Yes, but I have anyway. How's that? Yeah. Did a painting that we were, or did a drawing that we were certain we were keeping forever. It was our favorite thing. And then somebody offered me a lot for it. And I said, you know, if they love it as much as we do, and they're willing to part with that kind of cash for it, and they're
Send us
proving,
to Europe.
yeah, yeah, like we took a vacation on that money. They were proving they loved it as much as we did. And really, who am I to deny somebody that, right? Right? I mean, that's what the whole idea about art is. If somebody gets called by it and really has that strong feeling from it, then they need it in their life. And he really needed it. So.
Hello, Jeffrey.
I'll be out of your hair in
Oh, he left
2
again.
flashes. Oh, and talking to the wall. Excellent.
No, we often tell artists, there's really only one instance where you should put something in an auction as not for sale. And that's if it's a commission piece that you did for somebody and they're allowing you to show it. Otherwise, up at a crazy price. If you don't wanna get rid of it, put it at a crazy price that you'd be willing to get rid of it at.
Yeah,
If
if
it
someone
sells-
owns it, or if a company, like, if Blizzard had me doing the painting for them and allowed me to show it at art shows before they took possession of it, can't put it up at any price, you know, because they paid me a ton of money for it already.